before we start in for real, what's our age rating? Are we no cursing, G rated? Are we what?
This is triple X. Hi everyone, I'm Trent Kusters, co-founder of League of Geeks, and this is the Game Maker's Notebook. A few days ago, I sat down with Wyatt Bushnell and Mike Salyh, co-founders of Coin Crew Games. They've just released their brand new video game and their debut game, Escape Academy. It's available on Game Pass. It's a great little romp if you love escape rooms. And these two actually originated in the coin op industry. So, arcade machines and that sort of stuff. So for any of you who are interested in the differences between industries that sit right next to us, whether that be business or design or culture or whatever it might be, this is a really fascinating chat. We also spoke about their title, Escape Academy, of course, but specifically how they translated the differences between their experiences working on physical escape rooms into a digital format and the challenges they face there, but also the wins and bonuses that came of that. Say, for example, folks who can't access physical escape rooms now being able to experience that in a digital format. Truly wonderful stuff. We also spoke about how they built an engaging frame narrative around their series of escape rooms in Escape Academy. And we spoke about the Irish accordion and what makes the best kebab. It's a wonderful chat. I thoroughly enjoyed it. They're lovely gentlemen. I hope you enjoy it too.
Congratulations! You've been accepted to Escape Academy, an educational institution dedicated to the study of escape. I am the headmaster. On your path to becoming an escapist, you'll sharpen your skills with our spirited faculty.
What's up?
Professor Slip may look laid back, and he is, but you'll need to color outside the lines if you really want to impress him.
I don't even know why we put locks on the doors here.
Hola! Professor Bonilla will have you carving up coursework, all before her tea kettle comes to a boil.
The first rule of botany, keep your chainsaw close to your heart.
Greetings, pupil.
Professor Quanti isn't exactly a people person, but while his calculating methods may push your buttons, they'll also build character.
It appears you do excel in one area, failure.
Hey there!
And our groundskeeper Jeb is the key to running the campus like clockwork. Though, I'll admit he's prone to accidents.
It's all gonna be fine! It's all gonna be fine!
If you ever get stuck on a class, you can always double up with another student and tag team puzzles together as your story unfolds. Do you have what it takes to beat the clock and become an escapist? There's only one way to find out. Welcome to the Academy. Play it now on Xbox Game Pass.
Mike, Wyatt, welcome. Welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook. It's great to have you both here today.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us on the show.
Yahoo! So I've been playing a bunch of Escape Academy, but before we dive into this fantastic new game of yours from Coin Crew, which is your little outfit's name, we like to start this podcast, as you may be aware, by taking it all the way back. Now, there's two of you here, so I think someone can go first, but I'd love to hear how your history with video games started, like why this might be an interesting answer for you, right? But like, what's your exposure to video games? And then how did you sort of come together with Coin Crew? So why don't let's start with Wyatt, and then Mike will go to you, and then hopefully after both of you have told your stories, we can start with the merger of when you two met and started moving towards Coin Crew. So, all right, take it away. Your first interaction with video games, my friend.
My first interaction with video games was actually playing Pajama Sam with my dad when I was 1. So he inoculated me really early.
With your inoculations, you get your measles, you get your mumps, you get your Pajama Sam. Yeah,
it's just standard American healthcare. But my experience in the industry, when I dropped out of high school,
same, yeah,
because I hated academia. And when I was like trying to figure out what to do with my life, I kind of thought back to sort of the dinner table conversations and what sort of I had a good foundation in. and my entire family is in the games business, primarily location-based entertainment. And so I was like, well, if my family was in cardboard manufacturing, I would have gone into cardboard.
Yeah.
But my family was in games, and so here I am. So that was kind of my major impetus for going into the games business.
And so how early was that? So you dropped out of high school. What you and I, as an Australian, the American elementary, like I have no idea how old a freshman is, especially because they're all like played by 27-year-olds in the college forms or whatever. So how old were you when you dropped out of high school, and sort of when did this decision come about that you're like, you know what, Wyatt, I'm not going to fight it. Let's go with the grain here. We're onto a good thing. The Bushnells. Let's keep with the video game biz.
Yeah. So I was 17, and I did about a year of like freelance software development for like mobile games. I did some biotech stuff, and then basically serendipitously kind of got a contract to do a theme park attraction for this chain called Great Wolf Lodge. And it was basically like an early, very pre-escape room style escape room immersive experience. And yeah, I sort of just got thrown in the deep end on it.
So are you still 17 at this age?
I was 18. I was
okay,
18.
Right. Okay. I personally like to employ mine as from my escape rooms as well. So that makes complete sense.
But so after building that, I just sort of dawdled around to different theme parks and immersive chains, and I did basically contract attraction development for about 4 years, and then I started doing bespoke arcade attractions, and then like when I was 24, Mike and I met and actually building an escape room together, and that's when Coin Crew started, and that was sort of building. We were building arcade attractions as a company. Pandemic hit, and that's when we sort of dipped our feet into the Escape Academy waters.
Amazing. All right, pause there. Before we now switch tracks, Gwyneth Paltrow sliding doors style, over to Mike, I'm going to ask you one clarifying question. When you say location-based games, that can obviously, I think to some folks, that could mean a whole range of different things with Pokemon Go and geo-based games and all these different things. So for you, Wyatt, what's your definition of location-based games when you mention that? Because I know the two of you have specialized in that stuff for a while now.
Yeah, so for me, it's when I'm talking about location, and primarily the location-based entertainment I've always done has been like museum attractions, like sort of escape room style experiences, all the way to like actual physical arcade cabinets that are like in Dave and Buster's and that sort of thing. I've actually never touched that like Pokemon Go style experience.
The geolocation stuff.
Yeah, when I say location-based games, it's a brick and mortar games. Like you're playing.
You're going to the location where the game is. Where the
there's only that location, and that's it. Yeah.
Great. Okay. I think the closest.
Where does the goop come in?
We get there. Don't worry. It's spoiler alert. Come on. No, look. I think the closest I ever got to location games in my career was I pitched on a Chuck E. Cheese video game. I worked at a studio that made licensed games, and the random shit that would come through the door. And one year, like this pitch came through Chuck E. Cheese. I'm like, being in Australia, I'm like, what the fuck is this? What's Chuck E. Cheese? And they're like, oh, it's a restaurant chain in America. And I Googled it, and all I found was, of course, parents fighting at Chuck E. Cheese, like videos of huge brawls at Chuck E. Cheese. And I'm like, is this the game? Is it like an action brawl? And they're like, no, please no. So anyway, that's the closest I got. All right, we're gonna stop the podcast just here for a second, because I need to let our international listeners in on what Chuck E. Cheese is, and I failed to do it when we're actually having the podcast. So Chuck E. Cheese is an American children's family restaurant, and it's a kind of rite of passage for kids in America to have their birthday parties there. It's got amusement rides, it's got arcade machines, and strangely, it's got these wacky animatronic, like life-size, like human life-size animals that ended up being the inspiration for the Five Nights at Freddy's games. But beyond all of that, the strangest thing about us talking about it today is that when I was recording this podcast, I had no idea. But the founder of Chuck E. Cheese is Wyatt's dad, Nolan Bushnell. All right, let's get back into it. All right, sliding doors moment. Mike, your video game inception.
So I also started working on games probably around the same age that Wyatt does. I got interested in games in high school, just kind of as a hobby. This was back in like the web game days, like portals like Newgrounds or Y8 or Miniclip. And I loved those little games. And so I started making them as a hobby. Just with me and my friends. And in college, I studied animation originally, although I'm going to be honest, I'm a pretty terrible animator. But I liked I thought I wanted to do animation for games. Turned out I didn't have the patience for animation, but I really do like making games. And so I was just making Flash games as a hobby, and they started to catch on and get a lot of hits. And at that point, I started to think, oh, maybe there's a real job here in this. And from there, I got interested in actually becoming a professional game developer. I spent a couple years working on mobile games. I worked for Disney for a bit. I worked for Zynga for a bit. And then I switched and did educational games for a couple years, which was interesting, especially working with like a really, really young audience. My games were mostly for ages like 4 to 7. And so I don't know, that's an interesting age because like not even all of them can read. You got to design a game that is, it's intuitive enough for a super small kid, which there's an incredible amount of transfer you wouldn't believe between that and designing games for drunk adults at arcades. Nobody wants to read in either one. But so I was doing that for a couple years, and I'd been interested in escape rooms and puzzle games for a long time, but I'd never done it professionally. Me and some of my friends were making hobby projects. We made escape rooms in a box. We made some kind of escape room parties. None of it ever really took off, but it was a good portfolio builder. And eventually I got connected to an entertainment center called 2-Bit Circus, and they were working on an escape room game called Space Squad in Space. And they were, I had a friend there who was a 3D artist on that project. And he said like, hey, you should come check this out. And so I put my resume in. I said, hey, I'm an escape room designer. I never said I was a professional one, but I'd done it before. And I got that gig, and that was actually it was the first escape room I ever done professionally, and it was the one Wyatt and I met on.
Hey.
So we met working on this escape room. We were together on that project for like 9 months in this little 10 by 10 box. We didn't kill each other, and so by the end we said, hey, we got to keep working together, and that kind of became the start of Coin Crew.
It was a real meet cute for sure.
Yeah, it sounds it. And now, so these escape rooms in a box and the sort of hobbyist stuff you were doing, Mike, was that with professional or commercial aspirations, or were you sort of just creating them for mates? And
a little of column A, a little of column B.
I was going to say it could be both, right? Like, yeah.
We tried to see if we could get some commercial stuff going, but it never went super far, and we were kind of doing it off hours. We were both working full time as game designers at other studios. And so it was more for our own entertainment with maybe commercial aspirations. But ultimately, I think we were both just trying to get portfolio pieces.
Amazing. All right. So talk to me about this meet cute, this box that the two of you met in. Lay it out. Let's tell our listeners, and also listen. What were the roles that you two were playing there in regards to your jobs and stuff like that? Was one of you in the costume scaring folks, or like what's the deal? You just paint the picture of that period of your life. Would you say how many months were you there for?
We worked on it for. Yeah, I think like 8 or 9 months.
Right. And so was that designing it and then constructing it and running it as well, or?
Yeah, so we were contracted in to work on this thing. But we didn't like own the attraction.
Yeah, okay.
It was like for another entity. In
Yep.
terms of role, and I think one of the reasons like Mike and I sort of gravitated towards each other is that like it was basically like a split between like I would do like 70% of the programming, 30% of the design. Mike would do 30% of the programming, 70% of the design.
Love it.
And so it was like kind of I think that sort of versatility
Mm.
is really what you're looking for in a
Yeah, I
partner.
call it beautiful
Um,
redundancy right there. That's
yeah, because it's just it makes it really easy to
mm.
have conversations with that person because you're not having to like
You're talking the
explain
same language, right?
you're talking the same language. And so I and when you're looking for startup like co-founder, you want that versatility.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the primary thing.
Actually, fill me in, right? Because I'm picturing escape room, like physical escape room,
Mhm.
like moving the blocks, the big chunky key in the lock, like all that sort of shit. But you're talking about programming. So, what was the
Yeah.
digital aspect of the game?
So this was a kind of interesting escape room, and actually, I think the reason that I in particular got brought in on it was because it was a room that was half traditional escape room and then half kind of video game. The theme is it's a spaceship, and so there's a lot of the gameplay takes place on consoles in the room where you're pressing buttons and you have to solve a puzzle to turn on in the ship, and then you have to solve some mini games to fly the ship,
Yeah.
and then if you crash it you have to solve another puzzle to get it repaired. And
Right.
so it was
Okay.
kind of a cross between a video game and a more traditional escape room, which honestly was like, it was really great training wheels for what Escape Academy would go on to be, which is a video game escape room where we started kind of the inverse of that, the escape room,
Love it.
70% video game, 30% escape room or whatever.
So,
I lost the thread on that math.
no, I appreciate the attempt. So, set the scene. Very important question. What kind of era of sci-fi are we talking about for your space squad? Is it a Geiger-esque alien style thing, or are we like full blown like Lost in Space or Spaceballs or Star Wars? What's the vibe?
Yeah, definitely closer to Spaceballs. I mean, like we
I was getting
kind of
Spaceballs vibes.
yeah, we always veer on like comedy and approachability.
Mhm.
Just because like that's really what you're targeting for location based entertainment. Like you're just dealing with the masses are approaching your thing, and like everybody has to have fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of the theming.
Yeah, people
Yeah,
cry in escape rooms, but not because they're moved by the piece emotionally most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Because they broke up with their boyfriend or their partner or whatever. Amazing. Okay, so great. So you've created this game. You've run it for a number of months together. You've had this epiphany, this meet cute, where your eye hearts turn on, and you're like, we're each other's co-founders, and you kick off Coin Crew. My understanding, I imagine, is that you didn't kick off Coin Crew and go, let's make completely digital video games with no physical component at all, right? Like that was
Right.
not how you did it. So what was the mission? What was the kernel of the idea and the goal for Coin Crew from that moment?
So
Yeah.
our very first project. Oh no.
No, after you, of course.
All right, since I barged ahead, I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
Our very first project was an arcade machine called King of the Road that eventually went on to be a Hot Wheels branded game called Hot Wheels King of the Road. But when we
Sorry. I love that was a comedic gold. I was waiting for the name change, and it was just Hot Wheels.
No,
we love it.
Don't
Just put
fix what ain't broken. Yeah.
Beautiful.
I think the trademark for it is literally right there on the fridge behind me.
Great.
But so originally, I don't even think we set out to start like a studio as much as we saw this opportunity. Two Bit Circus, where Space Squad is also an arcade and a bar and kind of a hangout space. And we saw this thing happening in there on like Friday and Saturday nights, where it would get so packed. It would get so packed that there were people standing around just waiting to queue up to play a game. And we thought, oh, if there was an attraction here that had like 8 stations, 10 stations, if there was like a quick turn game, we could get a lot of quarters.
We're all in it for the quarters at the end of the day, really.
Yeah,
let's be honest.
It's arcades, Trent. It's arcades. Yeah.
We don't have big money bags. We just have big quarter. So we saw this opportunity, and we thought, hey, this can't be the only arcade in America that's having this problem. And so if we built a machine for 2-bit, well, we could use this as the prototype and then create this arcade machine. And as we built it out, we put our first unit on site there. It was doing really well. We partnered with another arcade manufacturer called Adrenaline Amusements, based up in Canada, for the full run model. And once we had kind of finished that project, I think Wyatt and I, we were in like Quebec City, and we were walking down the street, and we went, hey, there's a real company here if we want it. And I think that was the first day we thought, hey, this is more than just a project together. There's a whole company here if we want to go that route.
Amazing. And so Wyatt, how did that sort of pan out, that game, like Hot Wheels King of the Road, and that experience, like when the when the Hot Wheels hit the track,
Ooh, new name. But yeah, so no, it did very well. We like immediately got into all the Dave and Buster's. The big amusement trade show is in November, and so by the time
What's it called? Just out of interest.
IAPA, the
IAPA.
International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. That's like
Catchy.
the big, super catchy. But so we got into all the Dave and Buster's. And we're just selling units. We're consistently hitting our targets every month. And all throughout that, we were actually developing another arcade game called Battle Bowling, which was like a competitive racing game that took place on like a 8-inch trackball. I don't know what it is
so like,
in Australian measurements.
8 inches. What's that? That's like 20 centimeters. So and when you say that, I'm picturing an arcade cabinet, because I think we'll have to go to describe some of this stuff for our listeners, because you're different. You're what would we call it? Like alt sort of control methods, right, of arcades. So are we imagining an arcade cabinet, and then like the control panel in front of you is just an 8-inch? 20 centimeter,
big ass
like
trackball.
Yeah,
quite literally, like the biggest. I have a couple of funny anecdotes, because we actually had to custom make that part, and there's one trackball manufacturer like in the world, and I just remember talking to them, and they were like, "We build trackballs for arcades and the military, and that's it." And so
he got the call from you, and then he just hangs up the phone. He looks at his number 2. He's like, "It's time."
We finally got an order for the 8-inch one. But so we're basically in the process of pitching that game and securing a license to go on top of it for release. And then quite literally the trade show that we were doing that at was in March of 2020. And so it was like a week before the lockdown started. And I don't know how much you know about arcades, but they are not very pandemic proof.
I know basically nothing about arcades, but I do know that.
It's arcades and kissing booths. Both of those just go away immediately. Yeah. So basically that was kind of what prompted us to move from arcade games to a digital title, because I just want to
like bring it, because we're laughing about it, right? But that's you've just started a company. You've got your second game, and had you released, what was it called? Sorry, Bowling Kings.
Battle Bowling.
Battle Bowling, sorry. So I'm stuck on the King of the Road thing still.
Yeah,
Battle
yeah.
Bowling, right? Had it released at this point, or it was just in development, or?
No, so we were in like the prototyping phase. It was
Right, the
like on
pandemic.
site at 2-bit. We had like 5 units out in the world,
Yeah.
like getting
Wow.
earnings data. And yeah, it was very. I mean, it's
existential for your company. Like, it must have been tough.
it's also kind of existential as an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
Because like especially Coin Crew is probably is like my third company in location based amusement.
Mm-hmm.
And the other 2 failed. Like they weren't like colossal failures, but they weren't nearly at the success of King of the Road.
Yeah.
And it's sort of an existential, like, well, even when you do everything right, there's this totally hidden like tsunami that can hit you.
And there's no way that like there's anything that you can do in the arcade industry to like prepare for that, I imagine, right, as well. It's like, how does someone in the arcade industry like prepare to survive a global pandemic?
Right. It's like that. It's like that Star Trek thing. What is it? Like, you can commit no errors and still lose, which is kind of what we did a postmortem after it, and we was like, did we do anything wrong? Like, we were like, oh, we have no business. But then it was like, kind of like, no, I wouldn't have done anything different. We just weren't ready for a worldwide lockdown in the arcade industry.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, we're like, we're pretty privileged in general, right? Like, I don't think there really isn't anything that can sort of illustrate the fragility of a system like that global pandemic. We'd never been through anything like that.
No.
And so it was definitely, I mean, it's a pretty beautiful learning experience, but frankly, there's like the tiniest silver lining here, which is like, I don't think we ever would have done a digital title. I think we would have gone our entire career without doing an independent title, and it's something that we've really like loved doing. But if that pandemic hadn't hit, then we wouldn't have ever touched this space. Just because there's this like outside perception that video games are kind of this graveyard of value, and discoverability is such an issue. And like, if you put your blood, sweat, and tears into a game, are you just going to sort of succumb to like the ocean of other games that are coming out of here?
You're going to be, let alone a hit, are you going to be one of the 1,000 that even break even? Yeah,
exactly. But I think there's like, it's a there's sort of your perception of the industry outside of it, and then your perception when you get in. Like the thing that I always heard people talk about with arcade games is like, why are you building arcade games? Do people even go to arcades anymore? And it's like, when you're in the industry, it is a it's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's huge.
But it takes so much. Especially with that industry, there's like very little. It's all passed through oral tradition. There's very little like sort of studies or anything surrounding that space, but it's a thriving industry.
Yeah.
And so it's been interesting navigating
that transition.
Well, and the games industry from the inside.
I think we were both really surprised by just what it's like to be in home games. Just first of all, like, it's a really
I love the home games. I love you guys coming in and calling them home games. It's so fantastic. I was interviewing some of the devs of Moss, the VR game, and they were talking about flat screen games. And I was like, "Is that derogatory? Am I being? Is this a personal attack?" It's so good. Sorry to interject.
No, it is funny. I do call them that, and I never thought about it. But to be in console and PC and just this indie space and how welcoming it's been is really been an eye opener. Like, we were a part of Summer Games Fest in summer. We just came back from Day of the Devs, and like meeting other developers and like getting to talk to them. I've just been completely amazed by how welcoming and supportive and kind of willing to share everyone has been, because there's a lot, being first timers that we didn't know going into this. And so the amount of people and, who are willing to mentor us and say, hey, watch out for this thing. Hey, did you know about CERT? It's going to kick your ass. Like all this stuff that the community has been really nice. So I'm really been enjoying home games.
Yeah, especially coming from location games where, when you set them up, you have other developers come and steal like a circuit board out of your machine on the day that you're supposed to. No, I'm just joking, obviously. But it is.
No, there are some King of the Road knockoffs.
No industry is like exempt from clones, right?
Same form factor, just like Hot Wheels King of the Road. Never heard of it. Like, yeah. Come play Queen of the Street. Like
that's a very different game, actually.
Yeah, that's something
I said that we can swear on this podcast, but that's a very different game. Look, I this is something that we hear a lot in video games, actually. And for those of us who are, inside, like I've spent my entire video game career, little, very, very, very short stint in journalism that was literally just deployed to get into games. And then from that point onwards, I've just been in quote unquote home games or flat screen games. But it is, and so I don't really see it from the outside. Like this is one of the only industries, coming in when I was 20 or something like that I've been in, and being a naturally open, very transparent overshare anyway. It always is something that amazes me is how much people are blown away by the collegial nature of the industry. So like who were, I know you obviously partnered with IM8-bit. We will talk about that in a second. They're a fantastic crew. Who were some of the folks that helped you along, and what were some of those, how did it really blow you away, and what were those moments that really helped you out and set our sort of segment of this huge industry apart from your experiences before?
Yeah, I mean, I like our publisher support was really phenomenal, and they were like very like they've been supportive from the get-go. I think like talking our first real exposure to other devs was at Summer Games Fest. Yeah. And I think coming from I think there's this like in coin op and like location based games, everybody is like a suit, and it's all like, but what is this game gonna earn a week here? Like
how many quarters are we talking?
Yeah, what sort of quarters are we talking? And so you're not really actually talking to like devs, or people that like really care about the medium. And so to be able to go to Summer Games Fest to play other people's demos, then talk about their experiences, like in what they sort of went through. I mean, Billy from Animal Well is like my favorite guy ever. Like Madison from Birth as well. Like just hearing sort of their dev war stories about their titles. The Little to the Left devs were really great. It's sort of it is very like it's like fast friends, because you kind of all have this shared sort of like
you're in the trenches.
Game dev is like, it's all we want to do, but it's also a nightmare, and like here's how we've learned from our nightmares.
And so, Mike, I imagine a lot of that was at Day of the Devs as well, right? You just came back, and I know you've already released the game, but you've got DLC. Let's plug it. DLC, is it out yet or just announced? Right?
By the time this goes out, it's it's out. Yeah.
What's it called?
Escape from Anti-Escape Island. We're trying to figure out how many times we could put the word escape in a title.
So Mike, Day of the Devs, were you showing off the DLC, the new DLC?
Yep. Yeah, we had a booth showing the new DLC.
Right, and it's such a fantastic event. For those who aren't aware, Day of the Devs has been running for its 10th year this year, actually, by the crew, started by the crew at Double Fine, also run by IM8-bit as well. Maybe IM8-bit were there from the start. I imagine John and Amanda got their fingers in a lot of pies like that. But incredible event, just in San Francisco, showing off incredible games, really well curated. Just went down, first time back since the pandemic. Now, something hearing you talk about this shared experience is something that a lot of us indies went through, and building these, these collegial sort of networks of fellow folks in the trenches, as we were talking about, going tackling those same problems, staring the beast in the eyes, the same beast in the eyes. A lot of that happened with the Indie Mega Booth over the years, but now that's no longer around, we've got PAX Rising and stuff. Is a bit of a different. There's the Indie Arena in Gamescom, another fantastic outfit, very similar. But I imagine Day of the Devs would have had that. I saw some of the photos Greg was posting. Greg Rice from PlayStation, who's still behind Day of the Devs as well, of like just all the devs hanging out and everything. This network. I'm sure you, like you say, very fast friends, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And it was great to see some of the folks who we saw back at the original Summer Games Fest out here again, and we could say, "Hey, what's new?" And for us having the DLC on display for the first time with the public, it was cool because we got to see some folks and say, "Here's what's changed since last time you were here."
Yeah,
and,
you shipped since Summer Game Fest as well, right? And Summer Game Fest was in person this year too, of course.
Yeah, it was.
Amazing.
So it's cool to see, it's only 3-4 months ago, but it feels like there's a lifetime has happened between then and now. So to reconvene and just be like, look how many more gray hairs I have. It's fun.
Yeah. Right. I mean, well, there's this I don't mean to make this podcast all about the dichotomy between location-based games.
No, do it. That's why we're talking.
I guess that's why we're here.
Yeah, exactly,
But these sort of because these are trade shows now, and the difference between the two, it's in coin-op trade shows and location-based trade shows, you're going there to sell. You're meeting with operators, you're meeting with manufacturers, you're just on the business side.
Yeah, it's a sales gig. Yeah,
it's a sales gig. The trade shows in games are very that's not where the sales are happening. You might be talking to a publisher, but the reality is that all of the biz dev comes so far away from the show.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting. You're going to these sorts of shows, it becomes much more of we're talking about our trade. And we're swapping stories about how to make our trades better.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is it's a very it's very different. It's I think there's I think a lot about the sort of commoditization of games, because we're talking about thousands of games getting released every day, but I mean I do firmly believe that not all games are equal. There's a lot of in those thousands of titles. We're talking about I think there's a truck going by my apartment right now. But when we're talking about those thousands of titles, 90% of them are kind of shovelware, right?
Yeah.
And so I like seeing the seeing the devs that really do have that passion is always just such a
trying to
boost.
close these things out, and a lot also, Dave, the devs. The other thing to note too is that basically none of them are licensed games as well, right? So all of these are independent creators who've taken a bet on themselves, created their own IP, a lot of the time their own concepts or twists on a concept. They're innovating in very different ways, whether it be the way that they're rolling things out. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a form of catharsis there as well, of talking to each other about what's going on and sharing those war stories and everything too. Okay, so I'm8bit. Let's get into I'm8bit and Skybound and these partnerships, because you've obviously had Coin Crew. You're working, as you say, in the sales is a completely different other aspect of the industry. I remember I was at DICE earlier this year, and this is such a funny fat cat publisher story, but it's John, I mean, but obviously it's not the case. But we were sitting at the blackjack table. John, I'm watching John play cards, and he's like, oh, we're publishing a game. I didn't tell you we're publishing. We're getting into publishing. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I'm like, what is it? He's fucking escape rooms, man. I was like, oh, wow, amazing. He told me about your game. It was super. I could see the excitement on his face and the belief he had in this game. So how did? And it's just there's such a fantastic crew, I'm8bit. So some context for everyone here. I'm 8-Bit have been around for a number of years, and behind, if you're in the industry, I'm 8-Bit have been behind probably a bunch of things that you've either been involved in or attended. You might have a piece of merch that, you know, sits on your shelf, like maybe the Goose Game vinyl or, you know, the Diablo 2 collector's edition, like, or something like that. They run events for Fortnite and Epic. The Summer Games Fest they're behind, Day of the Devs. They have a gallery space in LA. They're amazingly prolific, incredibly creative company, run by fantastic people, Amanda White, John Gibson, and their whole crew. And they've stepped into games publishing, and Escape Academy is their first game. So how did Wyatt and Mike, Mike, maybe I'll throw to you. How did this come about? Did you just get a cold email? Did you hear, I'm sure you didn't reach out to I'm8-Bit and be like, hey, we should be the first game you publish. How did it come about?
I'm going to pitch this to Wyatt because you'd be surprised.
I'm the suit at Coin Crew.
All right, okay, great. Let's go.
But so when we built the prototype for Escape Academy in like 3 months, and we're like, okay, we need money, and we were kind of like, the idea of raising angel investment for a game sounded kind of crazy, but then we realized that really the reality of our industry is that publishers are your angel investors in today's market. And so I knew nobody in the industry except for John, because
well, I guess there's that overlap, right? Like he's doing location-based stuff as well.
But he also used to be a coin op journalist.
I did not know that. That's amazing.
And so I got introduced to John 3 years before before I reached out to him about Escape Academy, because a friend of mine in coin op, Ryan Cravens, is like best friend. He's a great guy. He was like, hey, John's in LA, you guys should talk. And we traded one email and we were like, there's nothing to talk about here. And then 3 years later, I was like, who do I know in games that can like kind of point me in the direction? And I cold called John.
You called him on the phone?
Yeah, because that's how coin op 2022.
Works. I love it. I'm so into that.
Nobody in location-based entertainment uses email.
Great.
It's like all oral tradition, all phone calls. So he was, I actually learned later that he was waiting for a package to be delivered and he thought I was a courier calling him. But we got on the phone and we ended up having like a 2-hour conversation. And then the rest is history.
Amazing.
So
incredible.
Yeah, and you know, frankly, like we talked to a couple of publishers about Escape Academy, outside of I'm8-Bit, and we went with I'm8-Bit because there's this like kind of fear for us that we get lost in the noise of a big publishing slate. You know, if you have 20 games on your roster, are you really giving all of them your attention? No, you're giving all of them 1/20th. Until one of them hits it out of the park, and then they're getting all of your attention.
Yeah.
So knowing that we were going to be their first title, we felt like we could pretty confidently count on that they were going to throw a lot of weight at it. And spoiler alert, they did. And then they brought on Skybound. So we kind of got the best of both worlds because we got the more traditional publishing systems. We had that sort of like institutional publishing knowledge, but then we also got I'm8-Bit on the side of like, we are going to make this thing a success.
So tell me about that relationship. So there's obviously Coin Crew making the game, you two, and I believe there's about 10 of you at Coin Crew as well. Am I right?
I think like 8 or 9.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
Great size, by the way. I love such a fun size. And you're at 10, you're really effective, and you've just hit that point where communication's a little bit, you know, you've got a couple of structures in place, but you're super effective. I love it. Sorry, just reminiscing a little. We're 60
No,
now, so
no, dude.
like, that's to me. I'm like,
preach. Yeah.
Okay, so you coin crew developing. You bring John and Amanda on board for publishing, but now John's reached out and grabbed Skybound. So what's the structure of the support structure, publishing? Who's doing what and stuff there?
Yeah, so iMate, they're basically co-publishers. iMate took care of the marketing and talking to first parties, while Skybound was more like production support, helping us through localization, QA, and that sort of thing.
Fantastic.
So that was sort of the dichotomy.
Stuff. Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And so I imagine that must have been like, Mike, what was that like? Was it sort of trial by fire, or did you feel that you were like handled with kid gloves the entire time and sort of ushered through? Or
no, I honestly, I don't think I could ask for much better than what we got. I think that because everybody who was working on this on the publisher side was also really invested in its success, I think they were all very transparent with us, gave us a lot of tips that sometimes, if anybody wanted to be sly, they could have said, oh, this only costs this much, tried to bid us down or something. And nobody was like that at all through the process. They were like, oh, you probably want to add another month here to the schedule. This is going to take longer. Is your budget realistic for this? And, that was just, as soon as that happened, it was such a like, oh, they're in it with us. We're all a team. And I think that's really key to any business relationship, is just feeling like you can talk honestly with your partners. So, I mean, we were definitely new to the space, and I think they helped us be a lot less green by the end of the project. And now we're grizzled veterans who are coming out the other end. So yeah,
we're just grizzled at this point. Yeah.
Veteran status TBD, but grizzled status is confirmed.
We'll have to wait for game 2 to know if we're veterans.
Amazing. So let's actually talk about the game now. So why don't we, Mike? Let's pitch it. For our listeners here, Escape Academy. I'm sure you just come back from Day of the Devs. I'm sure your elevator pitch is nice and polished.
Pressure's on.
No pressure.
No, so Escape Academy is an escape room video game that you can play either one player. You can also play it co-op, local split screen, or online. And so it's an adventure escape room game where every level is an escape room. And there's about a dozen escape rooms in the base game. Our new expansion pack adds 5 more levels into it. And basically it takes the intense time pressure, the puzzle solving, and the communication of real world escape rooms and brings them home into something that you can play on your couch.
And the interesting thing I found about Escape Academy too is it's almost got this like Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney vibe to it as well, with the manga-esque, anime-esque characters that are talking to you, and that sort of, it's got this frame narrative too that has an academia aspect, like a Fire Emblem or something like that, where you've got this Hogwarts-esque escape, Hogwarts for escape artists setting. And, a frame narrative sometimes can be a little bit forced or contrived, but this one's kind of just wacky enough that it really kind of tends to work with escape rooms, and it seems to solve some of those natural issues that escape room games can have, where they feel a little bit like, if you just got a list of puzzles, you just do them once and it's done. There's not much more meat on the bones.
Yeah. When we started this project, one of the first things we wanted to figure out is a setting that would allow us to have a broad range of environments of escape rooms, because the environments kind of set the tone for the puzzle. We knew we wanted like a science level, an art level, a history level. And we were brainstorming, and the two kind of options we came up with was it was either like a school or time travel. And I think Wyatt and I both looked at each other and we're like, time travel, we don't like that. And the other really nice thing that a school setting does is like, you can't, in the world, like puzzles don't happen accidentally. Like you can't trip into a puzzle. Like there has to be a mastermind behind any puzzle. And so by having this academia setting, it's like the professors are creating the classes are the puzzles. The
professors can provide different thematic like inspiration for each.
it all just kind of makes sense together. And
Mm.
then the humorous tone, like Wyatt was saying back when we were doing Space Squad, like as creatives, I think we always tend to gravitate towards like a humorous tone, because if you can get people laughing together, then that like it just breaks down the barriers of the walls of communication, and suddenly
Yeah.
everyone's talking and everybody's kind of lowered their guard. Also, like it's a world of puzzles. Like how serious can it be if the blender is locked up with a key? Like that's inherently silly. So we chose to lean into that, and it gave us a lot more wiggle room when we were designing our world.
Amazing. And so, Wyatt, talk to me a little bit about multiplayer and this nature of co-op, because escape rooms are like, I'm sure you saw the escape room enthusiast who came to Space Squad on their own and just tried to handle it all together. But like obviously escape rooms are something that you gather up some mates or your partner or whatever it might be, your dad who you haven't spoken to in 10 years and you're trying to break through some stuff together, and you dive into an escape room. So you obviously made a very conscious decision to not talking from personal experience, of course.
Yeah, Trent, you need to talk. I mean,
and with Escape Academy, you've obviously chosen very strategically and to do multiplayer. So talk to me a little bit about the multiplayer experience and what you wanted for it.
Yeah, well, I mean that actually then, if we're back to coin op, like I think for us it's we view games as sort of as a like icebreaker, or as like an activity to share with someone else. There's a lot I think that was sort of the main thing. We especially when we first started the project, we were all locked down. There weren't really that many kind of like frictionless co-op escape rooms on the market at the time, and we're like, we want that so that we can like play with our partners or significant others or to have or like families to be able to play together. Like one of the things I love about digital is just the fan mail we get. And there was this one letter we got that came from a mother who said that her daughter was mobility challenged, and so they never really got to play a lot of escape rooms, but they'd always heard about them. And so she just talked to us about how like kind of enchanting the format was and how it became that shared experience. The thing that
had that even occurred to you at that point in time that you were providing that kind of experience?
No. Absolutely not.
Like that, we had someone reach out to us after we shipped our mellow, and they were like, "I was in a devastating accident, and I'm in hospital right now, and I can only move like from my right elbow down or something." And they were like, "And your game is one of the only ones I can play." And we never even realized that you can just move your mouse and click like to play the game. And of course, like it just blew our minds.
By the way, I do love Armello. We haven't talked about that yet, but it's,
That's played. I'm reserving the last 30 minutes for you to.
Oh yeah, praise. Good. Okay. Yeah, I mean, like the one of the things that we really loved about location-based entertainment is when you're watching somebody play your escape room or you're watching somebody play your arcade game, you're kind of seeing those people like build a memory together. In that like that's what beautiful. They're going to when they go to dinner after that experience, that's what they're going to be talking about. And so like we really wanted to make sure that we still kept to that, because I think there's like I think there's this knee-jerk reaction to have games be this kind of like solitary sort of antisocial experience. But I think the market for people that play games is just ever expanding, and we want to make sure that they're hitting genres that they wouldn't normally hit. Like, how do we convert people from playing Bejeweled into something maybe a little bit more interesting? Not to throw Bejeweled flame shade.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're going to have the home game crew coming for you. That's one of our boys.
Right, Trent did Armello and Bejeweled. I keep forgetting.
Yeah, I'll fight you. Yeah, you can slag up Armello, but don't come after Bejeweled. Yeah, it's such an amazing thing, isn't it? This notion of like shared experiences just really, really amplifying things. And video games, as great as they are at shared experiences, there seems to be so many opportunities still for games that are single player or that could have these great components. And of course there are games that shouldn't be multiplayer and are as well. But like it really does, when done well, it really does amplify the experience. And how did you do you have any idea how that sort of worked in regards to because doing co-op for a singular escape room is one thing, but Mike, how did that translate across an entire game and a narrative? Have you seen people go through that or had any experience or any feedback there?
So from our very first prototype, like from week one of this, our first prototype was 2-player only. The single player mode was actually what we added in a little later in the prototype, but we knew we wanted this to be a multiplayer game. And I think the decision that we were weighing is can there also be a single player component to this?
Yeah.
I'm really happy we chose yes. But early on, we knew that like traditionally an escape room is a multiplayer activity. So we started kind of with the multiplayer mindset. It affected all sorts of decisions throughout the project. Like one thing that was important to us is we call it soft co-op. I don't know if there's a technical term for this, but basically there's no spots in Escape Academy where player 1 has to stand on this switch so player 2 can stand on that switch. The whole thing, the co-op action is talking through the puzzles together.
Yeah, it's the space between
and
the
working
players,
together.
Right?
Yeah. And so when we were designing that, we tried to think about puzzles that are good for conversation, puzzles that are opportunities where players can split up, or puzzles where 2 people can talk and, be a little bit more than just one puzzle working on it, one player working on it while the other player is just kind of waiting for them to finish it. And it also goes to some more subtle parts too, like when we were thinking about the visual novel sequences, we have optional cutscenes so you can engage a little bit more deeply with the story. But when we know that 2 players are both reading a cutscene, players read at really different speeds. And so we tried to, as we were testing the dialogue, some cutscenes just didn't read that well. It didn't work that well if one player was a significantly slower reader than the other. And we would actually rework the length of that cutscene to make it run a little smoother. So I think it permeated a lot of parts of the design.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you note that about doing 2 separate things at once to like engage a puzzle, because one thing that I picked up on, I didn't play it multiplayer. I just went through it myself, but I noticed that I was never sort of standing in one place, just like looking at a wall. And, there were those moments where I'm trying to, but most of the time I was actually ping-ponging around the level in all these different, like moving from one end of the room to the other and backtracking back and forth, and you're writing something down, a little piece of it. Thank you for that hint as well at the start of the game to grab a pen and paper. Writing things down and coming back, that it kind of, I can totally see how, that experience that I was having, I was playing those 2 parts. I was almost having a multiplayer experience with myself. Which actually just sounds really sad for me personally. I have friends. I could play with other people. I chose to play single player. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm judging.
Well, let's even it out. That's fine. But something I'm interested in is this. Like you're saying, for those folks who can't experience an escape room game for whatever reasons it may be, like it's this beautiful thing. You've taken something that is a location-based game. And it is quite physical, and you've made it a home game and digital, and where you can interact with it just with a controller or whatever your accessibility input might be. What are the parts that didn't translate? I have some similar experience to this where we prototyped Armello on paper, and even though we designed it from scratch through those entire 8 months to be digital first, we had that intention all along. There were still so many things that we had difficulty translating into that digital experience, or didn't quite come across. What were the things that worked and didn't work for you? What do you remember, Wyatt, that didn't quite translate in the experience?
I can think of a couple, but I'm going to pitch it to Mike first.
Go for it.
Oh man, now he said Wyatt, and I was like, I'm in the clear. My mind can go blank.
I'm just trying to balance out the interview. So you guys, you pitch it, whoever, you take whatever you want.
All right, I'll give one, and then I'll hand it back to Wyatt. One thing about a real world escape room is you can interact with anything in the room, within reason. But in general, a book on a shelf is just as important as any other book in the room because they're all books you can touch in real life. And early on in our prototyping, we had to figure out how interactive we want the room to be. Do we want to be able to pick up everything? Do we want to limit it to what you can click on? And it took a lot of balancing, and the system we ultimately decided on is a mix of things that are helpful for the puzzle or things that we call flavor text or label text, where it's just like a joke or a line.
Okay.
And so finding the right balance of how much of the room should just be jokes and red herrings and fluff versus how much of it is genuinely interactable was a balancing act. And one decision we made is nothing ever goes in your inventory if it's not part of a puzzle. I never want to give players a red herring that's like, well, I'm holding this screwdriver, but there's no screwdriver in the level. Which is something that in a real escape room you can totally do. You can be carrying around a book. Sure, it's a clue for 49 minutes of the 50 minutes, and be like, wait, this is just this copy.
This is just a book.
This copy of the Odyssey is just here. And so that was one thing where it was the digital affordance. It's a little bit more streamlined in the digital space than it is in real life.
Now,
did
you see that problem coming, or was that something that you saw? Did someone carry around a book and you're like, we can't have them interact with the book?
Our very first prototype. So we for context, we spent 1 month building a tiny prototype that we called the janitor's closet. And then we spent 2 more months building it out to be 3 levels of Escape Academy. And this is the one that we pitched publishers. It was rough.
Right.
But when we were building the janitor's closet, what we did is we designed the simplest ever escape room that would be in real life to build. It was a piece of paper that had a drawing of a shape, and then there were 4 tiles that you had to rotate into that shape, opened a box with a key, take that key into a lock, turn it, gives you a thing, use that to exit the door. It's the kind of thing that is just doing all the verbs of an escape room. Look at a paper, turn a combo lock, turn a thing. And our initial prototype was this would be a baby escape room in real life. Anybody could do it. Takes barely any brain power. Just as long as you can pilot this scene, you could get out. And we just tried to nail the UX of that. Try to make that feel how it would in real life, so that players would say, hey, that felt like the real thing. And once we had that UX prototype, only then did we start trying to build real escape rooms in the system.
Yeah, great. That was kind of like your little vertical slice, so to speak, almost.
Mike has a weird relationship with the phrase vertical slice.
Believe me. Yeah, we're going to do look. This is it's called the Game Maker's Notebook. It's also the Game Maker's therapy session for those who are on it. So please, vertical slice. What's going on, Mike? Are we okay?
You said the word. Now I go off for 2 minutes. I think that's one of those phrases where everybody says it, they mean something slightly different, and then somebody says, "Oh, make me a vertical slice," and then you come back and you're like, "This isn't a vertical slice," and it's like, "What did you mean by vertical slice?" So
you will get no arguments from me, my friend. No arguments. I completely agree. Okay. And something I'm thinking about as you're saying this too is you've obviously had this digital component to your location games as well. Were you this 70% or 50% of Space Squad, was that developed in Unity? Were you Unreal? What's the game actually? What's Escape Academy in? And were you already working in those tools before?
Yeah, so Space Squad. Escape Academy is totally in Unity. Space Squad was a Unity application with its backend written in Python.
Wow.
So it was 6.
Is there any particular reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, Yes.
I mean, there's a reason for everything at the start, usually, right?
Yes, and I will not elaborate. No. Basically, the whole architecture for Space Squad was like there's 6 consoles. All of those are running a Unity application.
Yeah.
And rather than doing the networking in Unity, we used Python to basically be the bridge between all of those consoles.
Oh, cool.
And then also a more abstracted sort of like show control flow. Because we're also triggering lights, we're triggering sound effects that are like exterior from those consoles and those cabinets. And so the Python basically serves as the brain to say like, okay, this Unity application, here's a message, you're supposed to interpret that and do this thing. But those Unity applications are basically just collections of mini games that they're getting triggered at different points.
So we've spoken about design and the business transfer from a location to home games, but what about the tech aspect? What about the code? Obviously, I'm sure you're happy to kick Python out the window for this one, right? Not have that brain, but now you're developing. You're on every major platform, right? You're on PlayStation, Xbox, and Steam.
Sure are.
Yeah. So, how'd you go, Wyatt, making your first game on premium consoles? Did Cert kick your ass?
Yes. I remember this one moment so distinctly when I was doing Coin Op, which was like, God, I don't get why indies are always complaining about how hard it is to ship a game. Because when I have to ship a game, I have to like make the game in Unity, and then I have to like put it in a cabinet, and then I have to like make that cabinet, whatever it turns on, it plays the game, and then I have to do all the like electrical to get the controllers hooked up. And I was like, so making a game, piece of cake. And now on the other end, it is night and day. Indie games are so much technically harder than Coin Op by like just such a dramatic, ridiculous margin. When you go from 3 minutes of gameplay in an arcade game to 6 hours, in like basically just all the sort of like UX and systems that players have come to expect from titles, like an options menu with FOV sliders, and like, does your game work on multiple different resolutions, and like, and also you have to localize everything, and like everything has to hot swap. And then like even getting to pre-cert is like a Herculean effort.
Yeah.
And then you go through cert and it's like, like that's also a nightmare. And so like it was definitely a baptism by fire that I don't think we were really prepared for. But yeah, I mean that I've learned a lot in terms of game architecture after, like, because we've kind of we've run the gamut now.
Of course.
Like we've done sort of every big technical hurdle that applies to every game, which is like we've done updates, we're doing DLC, we've shipped the game, we've put it on consoles, we've done cross-platform play, online multiplayer for those consoles. And so it's like I feel like we kind of ran the gauntlet of all the ways that like tech implementation can be a nightmare.
It really is one of those things that it is really hard in, not just indie development, but, any kind of development, but as an indie sort of like doing it for the first time, let's say, it actually is really hard to get to that finish line, but it can be done, right? Like you just do the things as they come up. You squash those problems that all seem insurmountable, and you can get that game to release when you push through. And it's really only at that point that you're at now where you can look back, you say you have such a better understanding of game like architecture, that's really the tomes that you're given at the end, the grand wisdom that you're given at the end is you're like, oh shit, we should have made those libraries more agnostic across the platforms, or our save data,
Yep.
our save file structure is really screwed us, an insert or whatever it might be. They're the little lessons that you take forward, and it's something that we see when we hire more senior devs, especially ones that have worked across AAA on large games and then done some indie stuff and everything. That's the stuff where you really see the wisdom come in. It's not that they're just like the best graphics coder you've ever seen or something. It's that they've seen 10, 15 times how games of all different shapes and sizes have been put together. And it's really that, we talk about a lot with design, the ability to know where to cut things. Mike, I'm sure you learned a bunch of lessons there, right? Even just in this new application. But it's, it's also in the tech side of things, the architecture of a game, and those big lessons about how to structure it.
Well, even as an indie, as like running an indie studio, those sorts of architectural differences and like what players expect out of your game also impacts sort of what game you're going to ship.
Yeah.
I mean, Escape Academy is 13 handcrafted levels.
Yeah.
And it's like there's just a lot of permutations about how that can like go wrong.
Yeah.
Which is why I think like we learned one lesson that I'm sure other devs have learned, which is like leaning a little bit more on proceduralized content. Because like that handcrafting, like building out systems rather than content necessarily. Which it's sort of how it all kind of intermingles is I think a very interesting side of indie game development that I didn't really see.
So that's a great question from here, Mike. What's next for Escape Academy? You got the DLC. Do you have a roadmap plan? Do you have your next game? Even for Coin Crew, do you have your next game in mind? Fill us in.
So I'll start with Escape Academy. No comment on any future games, but we do.
I can tell why. That's great. There we go.
Super no comment, Trent.
We do have a roadmap. We do have a roadmap for Escape Academy announced. So
yeah, cool, awesome.
Anti-Escape Island out. I mean, by the time this releases, out now.
Yep.
We have a free major update coming out early next year for Escape Academy. Can't say what's in it, but it is pretty major and it is pretty free. And then
good, love it.
Look,
Not
I got
completely
2
free,
words. I got to use them.
Amazing.
And then we have one more
enjoying continuing to develop and expand this game.
Yeah,
it sounds like.
And then we have one more expansion pack coming out in 2023 for Escape Academy called Escape from the Past. So yeah, we're definitely trying to take some of the lessons we learned building what we built so far and use it to make Escape Academy even more full of puzzles and escape. And then like Wyatt said, no comment on future games, but we're always brewing.
Of course, as we all are. All right, so I've got 2 interesting points, interesting facts during my deep dive sort of, Bourne-esque research that I did. I don't know why I said Bourne-esque. Jason Bourne doesn't do research on YouTube. Interesting. I'm going to throw to you, Wyatt. Irish tunes on the accordion. I hear you're a bit of an accordion aficionado. You can fill us in. How did this come about? Do you like?
I.
I'm really my research. Right?
You are. I tried like 8 instruments because I always wanted to pick up an instrument, and none really ever caught my fancy. I tried like the violin, I tried the trumpet, I tried the guitar, I tried the flute, I tried a bunch. I was out at a coffee shop, and this one cover of the Secret of Monkey Island theme song came up on YouTube. It was an accordion cover, and I was like, I'll give that a shot. And so like I basically bought an accordion on eBay that same day, and I was out of town. By the time I got home, it had already shipped. I played a little bit on it, and I was like, oh, I love it. And the Irish tunes came later, because I found that when you like learn an instrument and like it better, it sort of changes your taste in music. Like I was listening to a lot of like punk rock and stuff then, and then like learning the accordion. I was like, oh, the traditional is where it's
Yes,
at.
nice. So, do you still play?
Yeah. I play the Irish button accordion. I
Do you
can
play
show
in a
it to you.
band or anything, or
No. I'm just alone, like a lone Legend of Zelda character on a stump.
yeah, you're now at your accordion phase where your friends talk amongst themselves and say, if Wyatt has one more drink, he's going to bust out the accordion. We gotta wrap
yeah, we
this
can't.
up soon,
No more drinks. Yeah.
All right, Mike. This is something actually that's very dear to my heart as a Melburnian. I know you're very fond of the kebab as a food institution. Where did your love and your appreciation for the kebab come in?
I mean, I like to think it came at an early age. My dad's Egyptian. I'm half Egyptian, so
this is a really interesting point as well, is because a kebab is different from culture to culture. So for yourself, Mike, as a son of an Egyptian man, what is a kebab to you?
Well, I don't think I'm gonna describe the perfect Egyptian kebab. So hopefully this podcast doesn't make its way over to Egypt for me to get roasted. But I did
have a put on you for your
about the internet
description.
But so I lived in Los Angeles. I lived in a town called Glendale for 5 years, which is the biggest Armenian population outside of Armenia anywhere in the world. And so my ideal kebab is the Armenian kebab. And it's such a I loved living there because like on every block there would be like 3 kebab shops, and so I was just spoiled with I could take my pick of the best ones. And so although I feel like my friends did get sick of it because whenever they visited, I was like, come on, let's get kebabs. Like let's I want to show you the best spots, and it's like I don't know, you can't go wrong with grilled meat on a stick.
Right. So, okay. So when you say kebabs, and I actually just want to dig into this because I said this is important as someone from Melbourne. We have a huge Turkish community here. And then, of course, you have the great Greek, the souvlaki kebab divide, because we have actually the largest population of Greeks outside of Athens here in Melbourne as well. So in actually just one small town, that's not even Melbourne proper. It's like Oakley.
Okay, I need to go to Melbourne.
So you've got the classic lamb souvlaki meat. So a kebab here is the Turkish kind, which is the pita bread. It's not the super soft type. And then you've got the red onion, the tabbouleh, and you've got the garlic, and you get the chili as well. Sometimes the chips as well, but that's more of a souvlaki thing. So when you say Armenian kebab, are you talking like a shish kebab, like on a stick, or like on a skewer, or are you talking about a wrap?
So usually, and again, I'm not actually Armenian, so I'll be corrected if I'm wrong. But
through your experience,
through my experience. Also, I need to know, when you say chips in Australia, do you mean the American way or the British way?
Fries, not French fries, but like a thicker kind of chip. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Clarifying questions are out of the way.
Yeah, of course. No, this is a scientific conversation we're having.
Prepared on a skewer, usually served by taking it off the skewer. You can get it in a wrap. Personally, my preference is a rice plate with the salad on the side.
We love to hear.
I'm not a big sandwich guy. I just don't eat a lot of sandwiches. So you put it in a pita.
You lost me there, but I'm with you on the rice plate. That's
you put it in a pita, and it's a sandwich now. And then now we're in uncharted territory.
All right. Well, cool. Now that you've just taken this podcast and you've just thrown it to the ground, we've taken a big nosedive with your wild sandwich opinions and takes here, Mike. No.
In my defense, I'm from a town called Sandwich, Massachusetts. Real place. Okay. Look it up.
It's explained everything. At least you're not from Vertical Slice, Massachusetts. That's gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I love hearing about the dichotomy between, your location and the location games and home games, the coin-op industry, and the more traditional video game industry that you're now a part of. Welcome. It's great to have you here. And I really appreciated your time here today. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, Trent, likewise. really terrific. Thank you for having
Yeah,
us on.
thanks. Yeah,
You're
thanks for
welcome.
having us on. That was a lot of fun.
Best of luck with the DLC. Give it one more plug. What platforms is it on? Where can people grab Escape Academy? And how many escapes in the DLC title?
Three escapes in the title. You can get the DLC on Steam, Epic, Xbox, PlayStation. The base game of Escape Academy is on Xbox Game Pass. The DLC is not. So give it a whirl on Game Pass. If you like it, then buy the DLC.
We love it. We love an upsell on the podcast.
Yeah, but buy now. Beat the rush.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a wonderful evening.
Cool. Thanks so much, Trent.
Ta-ta.
Cheers.